Yes, that's the part. Good afternoon, everyone. Just thank you for being here. Let's just give the others just a few minutes, like 5 minutes, and then they can join, or we give them some time to join us. And then from there we can begin. So thank you so much for being here. Just listening, hold tight. We're just about to start. Let us give our other guests just a few minutes for them to be able to join in. Thank you for being here. Don't go anywhere. Don't touch that dial. All right. I think we can begin at that. How are you, everybody? Good afternoon to you. For those that we are in the same time zones, good afternoon to you. I hope you're well. Thank you so much for being here. We are so grateful that you guys would make time for this. We really appreciate taking your time to learn a bit about data privacy, and we promise you, or I promise you, that we have a very well packed up session. It's going to take us just an hour, 30 minutes, but after that, you will, I'm sure you will get out of this session very knowledgeable and having picked up some few of the skills that you can actually be able to apply. My name is Migwi Ian Bonface, and I'm so grateful. I work at Sentinel Africa. I'm the senior marketing officer currently. I'm dealing with brand and business development. But from that, I've been in the forefront in championing conversations like these ones. I've been moderating other webinars that we've had before. So if it's not your first time here, probably you've seen my face. So thank you so much for coming back. That means my face is not bad for you. You've just come back. So we really appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to even pushing these conversations further, because definitely we want to build our continent into a better continent. So that's why I'm really passionate about us pushing these conversations. So allow me to share my screen so that we can begin. As the other people keep joining, I see my panelists are joining in also. Allow me to share my screen so that now we can start from there. And just before I do that, kindly Mueni or Caro, confirm you can hear me, so that I will be sure.
Thank you.
Confirm. Thank you. So you can hear me loud and clear, yeah? Allow me to just share my screen. When you're Caro, also kindly confirm you can see my screen.
Yes, you can see.
Thank you so much. I hope everybody else, our guests, we can also be able to see my screen. Really grateful for you being here. So, welcome to the webinar. It's a data protection and privacy compliance, a practical guide to registration. That is, we are focusing on Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda today. And then we'll definitely mention a bit of the GDPR here and there and be able to cover the whole globe. Because I know we have people from different places. I know we are engaging with us from very many different places. So because we are all in some place, probably we don't use in summer, we cannot be able to shake our hands. Allow me just to run one poll so that you can know. Let's see how many guests we have here. So just on your just down there, go to polls. Pushed a poll. So it says, welcome. We would like to get to know our audience better. Please indicate your familiarity with Sentinel Africa. How much do you know us? Just vote. Is it your first time you're engaging with us? Or is it, have you interacted with us actually before? Also, you can tell us that some of us are really, we can call them partners of Sentinel Africa. We've engaged with them for more than a year. So you can vote, just go on polls, click just on polls, you will see a poll that is running there that tell us your familiarity with Sentinel Africa. Is it your first time that you're engaging with us? Have you interacted with us previously on a few sessions ago? Or are you currently, we can say, a member to Sentinel or a very loyal customer to Sentinel, meaning you've probably been with us for more than a year. So thank you. I see people are still voting. I see we have the biggest number of guests, 28 out of 47. I see you can keep on voting. I see we are 79. You can vote. Just go to polls. Tell us your familiarity with Sentinel. This is going to help us to know, even as we're having our conversation, how to phrase our conversation, how our panelists are going to phrase the conversations, so that now we can always be able to give you better. So thank you so much. I see most of you have voted. We have most of here, my panelists, as you can see, most of us are new to Sentinel Africa as a brand. So thank you so much for joining us. The Sentinel Africa is a risk management consultancy firm. We are advisors in this field of data privacy, business continuity, talking of enterprise risk management, even talking of things like information security. And you will get to know more about us, and we'll appreciate our relationship as we go ahead. So allow me to go back and share. Go back sharing, so that now we can start our webinar, guys. And I will appreciate, these things. Good. So thank you. So can you confirm you can also see my screen on full screen now? You can, yeah? Carol, Mueni, just confirm you can see my screen?
Yes, you can see it now.
All right. Thank you. So guys, allow me to begin by giving us a quick overview of how it's going to be. We are going to start with an introduction, what we've done already. Then we are going to get into a panel discussion. We have 3 panelists. The 3 panelists are going to help us in diversify or simplifying this particular conversation. Then after that, we'll have you guys ask some questions. Now, those questions, we'll ask them verbally, yeah? We'll choose 3 or 4 of you to introduce yourself and ask those questions. And then after that, we'll have a call to action and have some feedback from you. Then we'll have the closing remarks from our guests, our panelists, and then we're going to end it at that. So just to a few house rules, the webinar is set to be 1 hour, 30 minutes. And then to a few house rules is we've muted all your microphones, if you can note. So when it gets to the part of Q&A, you're just going to raise up your hand. After you raise up your hand, we're going to unmute you and you'll be able to ask your question verbally. But just before you ask your question, you can always introduce yourself, tell us where you're engaging with us from, and then our panelists. I'm going to direct the questions to 1 or 2 of our panelists. Then, as you've seen, it's about the compliance. We're going to simplify this conversation, bring it a little bit lower, so that you guys can be able to understand the registration process, where you need to register, and then after you register, what do you do after that. So let me begin it by bringing it down to you guys. So I think most of us have the gatemen or the soldiers at the gate that collect information. Yeah, some of us would want to have the picture one, but most of us probably have picture 2 and 3. Yeah. So how much do we collect? How much data do we collect at the gates? Just simple as the book we fill. Do we really need to fill that book every day that we come in? Do we really need to give all the details? Do I really need to give my number? Do I really need to give my ID number when I'm getting into a building? Is there a way we can be able to minimize? Do I really need to sign again if I come back tomorrow to the same building? Are we having that conversation in our offices? Is it posing some data risks, collecting that information more and more? Which risk are they posing? So this conversation is as simple as this, beginning it from here, as simple as our day-to-day activities. Then definitely we have regulators or authorities in our region. We have basically in Kenya, we have the ODPC, which has made a number of strides, and also have made a number of fines currently. They find a number of companies who are probably not compliant. And then we have in Rwanda, we have the National Cybersecurity Authority, which has created now the DPO office. And then in Uganda, we have the Personal Data Protection Office, and which is definitely underneath Uganda. So these are the regulatory authorities or the authorities within our region. Yeah, these are the ones probably we need to register with, but we are going to dive into that more, because I'm not really competent to do this, to give you the whole answers to this conversation. So, but I will have with me 3 panelists. Allow me to introduce them so that they can be able to even give us more. So, number 1 panelist who is going to be representing Rwanda, her name is Mueni Faith. Mueni is currently the head of projects at Sentinel Africa. Then she's an information security expert. She's an ISO 27701 PIMS certified. She's also a CISA and a number of accolades that she's going to tell us more about. So Mueni, we are really grateful to have you. Thank you so much. You've been in the forefront of this conversation, and we are really grateful to have you to share some of your expert knowledge on the same, even on implementation and how 27701 interacts with data privacy and all that. Then number 2, we will also have Mr. Stephen Mugabe. Mr. Stephen Mugabe is a CISA, CISM ITIL, and currently he's a manager or data protection affairs at the PDPO in Uganda. This is the authority in Uganda. He's our guest panelist today, and we are really grateful to have you on board, Stephen. So then the other person we're going to have as a panelist, she's currently in Rwanda. Her name is Caro Wawera Muriithi. Ms. Caro, we are really grateful also to have you. Caro is a consultant at Sentinel Africa, and she's also a certified data protection officer. And currently, she's actually taking the same conversation in Rwanda and other different countries. And we are really grateful also, Caro, to have you. We've read a number of your articles, and I think now it's good to also interact with you on a one-on-one basis. So allow me to probably just maybe go ahead and ask them to introduce themselves. That is, I can start with Madam Caro from Rwanda. You can kindly just introduce yourself. Tell us why you were so much passionate about this conversation as a certified data protection officer, some of the strides you've been able to do. Just say hi to our attendees, and then we'll pick it up from there. Caro.
Thank you very much, Migwi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the session. My name is Carol Muriithi from Sentinel Africa, a consultant. I deal with implementing information security management systems and data privacy. So far, we've been able to implement a couple of data privacy projects for various companies in various industries in Kenya and Rwanda. And this is an interesting conversation to have so that you're able to understand what the requirements are and also how to generally register with the different regulatory bodies. I'm glad to have this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, for making time. We're really grateful to have you. Thank you so much. And then we can have Mueni introduce herself also. Say hi to us.
Right. Thank you very much, Migwi. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Faith Mueni, as Migwi has mentioned. I am an information security consultant currently working here at Sentinel Africa. What do? I implement and work with a team of very great consultants to implement projects that are geared towards managing risk across 4 key areas, that is business continuity, enterprise risk, information security, and data protection and privacy, which is essentially what we're discussing today. My background is in information security, basically. So I started off as an IT systems administrator, basically doing database administration and development of security tools for databases. And then that morphed into conducting information systems audit. And slowly that journey led to broadening the perspective to look at risk in general, and that is how I ended up here implementing information security, privacy, business continuity, and risk management frameworks. And yes, I'm super glad to be here. Love the conversation that we're having right now with regards to compliance when it comes to relevant data protection laws in the region. It's something that I'm passionate about, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation. And I'm hoping that out of this, we're going to have, tangible and actionable points that you can take back to help you with your registration journey if at all you haven't started. And if you're already registered, also for you to understand what needs to be done going forward from a compliance perspective. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you for having me, Migwi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mueni. We are really grateful. We can't wait to tap into some of that knowledge, yeah, and we really appreciate. Then to the final person, I want to welcome Mr. Stephen Mugabe. Stephen, you can say hi to us, and from Uganda, say hi to us and tell us probably why you're so passionate also about this conversation. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I can be heard.
Yes, we can hear you, Steve. Just increase a bit your volume.
All right. My name is Stephen Mugabe from the Personal Data Protection Office. I'm very passionate about privacy, and the role that I play is to ensure implementation of the law within Uganda. And I'm happy to share insights on what the office does, what we've done so far, and what everyone needs to look out for. Background-wise, I'm trained in computer science. I'm a certified information security manager and certified information systems auditor. I'm happy to be here to share some insights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve, for making time out of your busy schedule. We really appreciate it. I'm sure we're going to learn also a lot from you. So guys, without much further ado, allow me to probably just kickstart this conversation. They allow me to share my screen so that I can guide you through the questions. What you're going to do, you're going to have a round of questions from different panelists. And then from there, we're going to have questions that are general. And then we're going to give you a chance to ask some of the questions. So as we go on, if you realize or you have a question, just type it on Q&A on the webinar portal. You can be able to see Q&A. As we go on, if you have a question that you feel you really need to ask as we go on, just post it on Q&A, and then I'm going to assign it someone to answer it as we go on. So thank you so much, guys. Allow me to share again so that we start this webinar. So now, guys, I really want to start this conversation probably from a very good point. And I will throw this to Mr. Stephen Mugabe. I will throw this first question to you. Can you probably provide a brief overview of the data protection regulations in Uganda? And as you do so, Maybe you can also shed some light to about that, the regulatory body created by that act, yeah? And then probably also tell us what are some of the roles that that regulatory body play in enforcing compliance, specifically in Uganda. So, Mr. Steve.
All right, thank you. I'll start with the law. Uganda enacted the Data Protection and Privacy Act in 2019, and this was primarily to give effect to Article 27 of the Constitution. Now, Article 27 of the Uganda Constitution introduces the right to privacy, stating that no person shall be subjected to interference with the privacy of that person's home, correspondences, communication, and other property. Now, from a regulatory point of view, it was seen that Article 27 alone is not sufficient to provide for the much required privacy of an individual. So the Act comes into play to help by comprehensively and adequately providing for matters of, on data protection and privacy, and in particular to protect one's privacy and their personal data in terms of regulation on the collection, processing, and storage of that person's personal information. I know some of us may know what personal data is or not, but for purposes of this discussion, we shall say personal data is information that can be used to identify a person. An example is if you know my name, my telephone number, my email address, my academic records, that information can be used to identify me as a person. So that is what is called as personal data. So the Data Protection and Privacy Act was enacted to provide for a regulatory arm on how this personal data is collected and processed. In terms of this regulation, it's for anyone who is collecting and processing personal data within Uganda, or whoever is collecting personal data for any Ugandan citizens outside Uganda. So if you're in Kenya, if you're in Rwanda, and you're collecting and processing personal data of Ugandan citizens, you are subject to this law. And if you're within Uganda, collecting any personal data for be it for Ugandans or not, you still have to comply and abide by this law. Again, in terms of the regulation, in 2021, the Data Protection and Privacy Regulations were published in the Official Gazette. To be specific, that was March 12th, which provided for the establishment of a dedicated independent office, which you asked about, the regulatory body that is overseeing the data protection and privacy. So the office was established by the regulations published in March, which is the Personal Data Protection Office. And in terms of the role the office is supposed to play, one is to oversee the implementation and enforcement of the Act. The Act has requirements, guidelines that are supposed to be followed by all people who are handling personal information. So it is the role of the Personal Data Protection Office to ensure the implementation and enforcement of this Act. And in enforcement, the office is also supposed to establish and maintain a data protection register. We will probably go through the registration process and why it is important to register. The office also has the mandate to set, monitor, and regulate standards for personal data protection as we protect personal data. What standards are we supposed to follow? It's a requirement for the office to set particular standards. The office also has to conduct audits to ensure compliance by data collectors and data processors. You will see that after registration, it's not the end. The office will take another step, and even you as a data collector, you need to do a little more to ensure compliance. The office also has to primarily monitor and investigate observance to the right to privacy, and in case anyone is aggrieved on the way their personal data or their privacy is handled, can report to the office, and we are mandated to monitor and investigate your particular complaint. And in that line, we receive and investigate complaints regarding violation of the Act. So as we further into the discussion, we will see how to get to the office and what the office is supposed to do in that regard. I hope that provides an insight on the law and the office overseeing the data protection and privacy in Uganda. Thank you.
Sure, Steve. Totally. So that's great. If 2021 now, it's been let's say almost 2 years now, and I'm sure the strides that you guys have made. So thank you so much. So guys, the PDPO is under Steve. Probably you can just clarify. The PDPO is under NITA Uganda for the sake of our guests.
Yes, the Personal Data Protection Office, PDPO, is an independent office set up and running under the National Information Technology Authority. But key to understand is that the office is independent, and the operations of the office are independent by law and by international privacy standards requirements.
All right. Thank you, Steve. That's good. I think most of the people probably have known of NITA Uganda, but the PDPO then is an independent body under NITA Uganda. So allow me to push ahead and go to Madam Mueni. Rwanda is also in the journey. Rwanda has also picked up. We are enacting laws in each and every country. Now Rwanda is also coming up. A law was enacted, and actually in Rwanda, the deadline that was set for registration is in October this year. So we are about how many months? A few months away. So should this actually worry data controllers and processors in Rwanda? Should they be worried or about the deadline, or should they haste in registration, or what should they do? Madam Mueni.
All right, thank you, Migwi. Yes, so we're 2 months away from the deadline for compliance. So basically, the Data Protection and Privacy Law of Rwanda was enacted in October 2021. Yeah, so that gives it 2 years. So it was enacted in October 2021, and so all controllers and processors in Rwanda had been given then 2 years to comply, and so the 2 years lapse in October 2023. So specifically 15th October. Yeah, and so then what does that mean? What does that mean to any organization that has not yet registered as a controller or a processor? So the expectation is that under the law, you identify as a processor or a controller, yeah, and that you register and you get a valid license to show that indeed you registered and you're in compliance with the requirements of the state law. And so any organizations then that shall not be compliant by 15th October, they shall suffer an administrative fine of not less than 2 million, but not more than 5 million Rwanda franc, or 1% turnover of the preceding financial year. Yeah, so the expectation is that for Rwanda right now, all processors and controllers should be finalizing with the registration so that they can get their licenses. There are a few, the details in terms of what you need to have in place for you to be given the certificate. And I know we're going to cover that. But then now, as they do that, identifying as a processor or a controller, ensuring that you have the necessary policies in place, that you know the kind of data you're processing, the supervisory authority, that is the National Cybersecurity Authority of Rwanda, has given, there's an email address that they've given, that is dpp@ncsa.gov.rw, that then processors or controllers are supposed to submit their soft copies of their applications to. So there's definitely a rush now to ensure that in Rwanda, the registrations have been achieved. Migwi, can you hear me?
Yes, Mueni, sorry for that. So you're telling me 2 million to 5 million is actually a fine that can be slapped on controllers and processors in Rwanda? That is Rwanda franc?
Yes, those who have not registered, not because of non-compliance. Non-compliance has a different fine, but for operating without a license, by 15th October, that is the fine.
Okay. I think then the answer should be, guys in Rwanda should start getting worried. We don't have a license, yeah? So thank you so much, Mueni. Allow me to jump right into another question to Ms. Muriithi Caro. Caro, the ODPC is one of the most known regulator in our region, yeah? It's made a number of strides ahead, yeah? I've seen even other data protection offices from other countries, from Zimbabwe, from Nigeria, coming to Kenya to benchmark with the ODPC, yeah? So it's made a number of strides ahead. But now, probably for those that are in Kenya, or for those that are processing data for Kenyans, like the way Steven said, that even you don't have to only be in Uganda, but if you're processing data for Ugandans. Now for Kenya, what are some of the things? Would you explain maybe some of the must-knows on the registration process for data protection in Kenya? What are some of these things processors and controllers that are either in Kenya or processing Kenyans' data that they must know about this registration process? Madam Caro.
Thank you, Migwi. So yeah, the first key, what you've just mentioned, the first thing to note is that registration is mandatory when you're processing Kenyan citizens' information, whether in Kenya or not in Kenya. So this registration is both for individuals and institutions. In as long as you're processing any personally identifiable information for Kenyan citizens, you need to do an analysis of your processes to see the amount of personal data that you're processing, and so that you're able to do this registration. Also, another key thing to note is that there are some certain industries that have been highlighted by the ODPC, or the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner in Kenya, who's the regulatory body in Kenya, that need to register mandatorily. And these are industries or organizations from industries such as credit bureaus, debit administration, any health administration, companies, hospitality, companies in insurance, financial services, retirement benefits, telecommunication, marketing, transport, and the public sector. But however, this does not mean that other institutions are also exempt from registration. The other key thing we need to know during registration is registration depends on the number of employees, and the annual turnover of the organization, because there are costs attached to registration, which we shall look at later. You need to know the number of employees and the annual turnover. Then you need to understand your role during registration. So when you're registering with the ODPC, you need to register as either a data controller or a data processor, or both, depending on your role in as far as processing information is concerned. So just to, in brief, a data controller is any institution or individuals who determine the purpose of collection and processing of information. So they determine what information will be collected and how it will be processed. While on the other hand, a processor is an institution or organization who processes the information on behalf of the controller, and they have a contractual agreement for them to be able to process this information. So as an organization, you need to determine whether you're a controller or a processor. and you register with your specific role. So you can either register as a controller, a processor, or if you're both a controller and a processor, you need to apply for 2 certificates. Okay. Then the other thing you need to probably take into consideration during registration is understanding of the personal data that you process within your organization. So it might help to develop a personal data inventory, which is also a requirement under the law, where you're able to understand all the information that you hold within your organization and the processes that you have. So that because when doing the registration, you're required to indicate all the data subjects whose information you have and the type of information that you have. When doing this, you also need to consider any sensitive information that you process. So sensitive information basically is information that can pose a high risk when exposed, or can also be used to profile your data subject. So this is information such as your ethnic origin, health status, sexual orientation, or even children's data. So you need to also indicate any children's data or any sensitive information that you process. Also, looking at the information you process, you need to look at if there are any third parties that you share this information with, because you need to indicate them. And also, if you're going to transfer this information to any other country outside Kenya, you need to take note of the same, because you'll be required to provide that information. Then the other consideration you need to make before you register or during registration is you need to understand the risks within your environment that could affect the data subjects. So there's what we call the data protection impact assessment. So this is basically a risk assessment of your processes or the systems that you use to see that the risks that might lead to maybe a breach of the data subject information, which might pose a high risk to them. So this is also information that you're required to provide during registration, together with the controls that you have implemented to ensure that the risks have been closed off. So understanding of your risks is also very important. And then the other thing important to consider is you might want to have hired or gotten or appointed your DPO beforehand, so that you just provide their contact details, because the ODPC requires that you give them a contact person within your organization, and it will help if you would have appointed your DPO beforehand. So those are the key things that you need to consider before registration. However, we need to take into consideration that registration with the ODPC is just part of the compliance requirements of the law. But in a summary, those are the key things that you need to consider for registration, particularly in Kenya.
Thank you, Carol. So you're saying it's just the beginning, yeah? There is a whole other journey ahead of registration, yeah? That's great. And then I've heard you mention, probably, Carol, you can just break it down, the controller and the processor. How do we know where we are? Is the bank the controller? Is the CRB the processor? Probably you can just give an example to break it down so that our attendees can be able to tell, am I a controller or am I both? And will I have to register as both? Just before I let you go.
Okay. So as you've said, we have a data controller and a data processor. So a controller is any individual or institution that determines the collection, the purpose of collection of the information, and the means of processing. And then the processor, on the other hand, is the person who receives this information from the controller and processes it on behalf of the controller. So an example would be in an institution when maybe we are doing hiring, we are the ones who are collecting our prospective employees' information. We are the ones who determine how it will be collected and how the information is going to be used. So in that capacity, we act as a controller. But then if we involve any other third parties, probably to help us do any kind of background checks, and we share this personal information with them, then in that case, they become our processors. Yeah. So they process this information on our behalf, and they're only allowed to process this information dependent on the contract that we have with them. So they can only use this information regarding how or to the extent in which we have allowed them to use this information. So I hope that is clear. So that's the distinction between a data controller and a data processor.
That's perfect. So if this guy here is hiring for you, he's the processor, then he's collecting the data for you. You see, I'm getting these things. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Carol. I hope everyone else is getting it. You also mentioned a bit of DPIA. It's good in Kenya. People need to probably carry out the data protection impact analysis assessment. So thank you, Carol. I think I hope you guys are taking notes, yeah? And allow me to jump from there, go back to Mr. Stephen, so that Stephen, probably you can give us the key requirements that institutions need to implement in order to comply with the data protection regulations in Uganda. Is there any difference? Can you probably tell us what are the very key requirements that those that are in Uganda need to comply with for them to be, the institution need to implement? What do you need to implement for you to be compliant with the data protection regulations in Uganda? Mr. Stephen, over to you.
All right, thank you. Compliance with the law in Uganda starts with step one, which is a registration with the office. And our office has made the registration quite simple and seamless. It's all done purely online. Once you get onto the portal, pdpo.go.ug, you register, and then you are able to walk through the registration. Now that is step one towards your compliance. Registering requires you to have a data protection officer in place. You cannot register before you designate a data protection officer. The law provides for flexibility that you don't need to have the data protection officer dedicated to that role only. You can designate. For example, you may have an internal auditor who you designate the role of data protection officer. They just need to know what they need to be doing as data protection officer. We'll probably look at the roles later, but it's a requirement number one that you must have a data protection officer in place as you register with the office, because that person now becomes the liaison between our office and you who has registered as a controller or a processor in any case. Now, during the registration, you also declare the personal information that you handle. That one helps us to be able to follow up and to also assess the other requirements that you need to have in place as an office. Next, you need to have in place, we are now moving towards compliance with the law. You need to have in place a data protection policy. This basically tells me and you, the data subjects, together with the office, how you're handling the personal data that you indicated to be collecting or processing, how you're going to handle this information. If you share it with anyone, you need to tell us that you share your personal information with, say, agency X for reasons ABCD. It could be required by law. An example, you could be sharing personal information with revenue, which is required by law for purposes of collecting tax. So you need to indicate who you share the information and whether it is backed up by the law. And then next, you need to have in place security measures for protecting the personal information that you have. If we are giving you our personal information, where do you store it? How do you store it? Who has access to it? And what security measures do you have to guarantee the security of the personal information, so that we are sure that you're going to use it for only the purposes we are providing that information. We're talking about having security measures in place, but that is not enough. You need to do continuous monitoring internally to ensure that the measures in place are working as expected and giving the much required confidentiality and integrity plus availability of the information. So now we move into the technical aspects of information security. Again, we talked about having the data protection in place. It's not enough to have a policy in place, but you need to do continuous assessment and monitoring to ensure that the policy is implemented as documented. Otherwise, you could have a policy, but then your actions on a daily basis are contrary to what the policy says. So once you register as a data processor or data controller, we encourage you to continue working with the office for guidance on what you need to do to ensure full compliance. Compliance is not a one-off that, I've registered, I have policies in place, I have security measures, and then you go to sleep. It's a continuous process. You need to keep monitoring, you need to continue making sure the policies you have in place are implemented. And then we expect you to have an awareness program, because everything else can be in place, but if the people that you're working with in the organization over and beyond the data protection officer are not aware about their obligations, then it may all go down to nothing, because data protection works along the data life cycle. We do not want you to think about data protection at one point. For all the information that we handle within the organization, we collect, process, use, store, and even dispose. So we need to be cognizant of privacy at all stages of the data life cycle. So we expect that everyone in the organization is aware of their role in ensuring that they observe the privacy of the information that is in their possession. I'll give an example. If I applied for a job at Sentinel, I'll probably bring my application and drop it at the reception. Now, the person sitting at the reception needs to know that this application has sensitive personal information. I'll be declaring my education, I'll be declaring my academic qualifications, I'll even have copies of my academic qualifications. Some people even ask you to provide national ID. Others even ask you to declare how much you've been earning. So all this is personal information. So the person who receives this application needs to know how they need to handle this particular application. And then it goes over to the human resource. Now, human resource is going to do their work. If, for example, I'm unfortunately not picked, then my application should not just end on the street so that anyone can pick the papers and they are able to see my frustration looking for a job. The process goes on up to a point when I'm either hired or not. So whoever is involved in that chain needs to be aware of how to handle personal information. That's why it is very important that among other things that you do to comply with the law, you need to have a continuous awareness program within the organization. There's quite a lot that we can talk about, but briefly, if you register with the office, which requires you to have a data protection officer, declare the information that you have, the personal information you have in place a data protection policy, have in place security measures, and continuously monitor the implementation of the policy and measures, and have an awareness program. We believe you're moving closer to compliance. And then again, most importantly, keep in touch with the authority through your data protection officer for continuous guidance where you need clarity on anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. I think that's so well put. I think guys can, you guys, I hope you're taking notes, because some of this information is not provided all over. And thank you so much, Steve. I think that process is quite well. I have had some difference from other, depending on other countries. At least I've had in Uganda, there is a bit of insisting on the awareness program for people to actually, which is actually very important, because if only the HR knows the policy, or only the HR is aware of the data protection and privacy policy, then the person at the reception might actually just tear out the envelope and leave the information just lying on top of the table, and that is personal identifiable information. So guys, Steve, probably just before you go, does Uganda have a deadline? Is there a deadline set up for registration, or there isn't any in Uganda?
Thank you. We are past the deadline for registration, and failure to register, you face the arm of the law, and proceedings are going on for those that have not been able to register. And because we push more for compliance, we are still calling on those who have not registered. Usually those excuses of I had challenge X, I had challenge X, and we are trying to listen to that. However, there are those that received clear communication, including letters delivered, and have not registered. Next step is to act as the law guides.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then there's continuous renewal of the registration, because the law requires that every 12 months you renew your registration. So at that point, you provide more information. If anything has changed from what you previously declared, you provide and we update the register accordingly.
Perfect, Steve. I think it's important to know that at least in Kenya it's after 2 years, in Uganda is after 1 year. So guys, if not registered, it's important, because this conversation, it's the very first step of compliance, and actually the challenges you're going through, we can always assist you get through them at Sentinel Africa. That's why we are your advisors of choice. Now, Mueni, how does these requirements, probably the ones that Caro has said and the ones that Steve have probably given to us, how do they differ to those ones in Rwanda? How do they actually differ? Is there a difference, a bit of a difference? Could you kindly just take us through them?
Okay. All right. So in terms of registration in Rwanda, the requirements are pretty much the same as what you have in Kenya and Uganda. Yeah. So you again just have the basic details of who you are as a person, your identification, whether you're doing this as an individual or an organization. So identifying who the organization is, and also having the details of the contact person for the organization. Then you need to have, of course, the personal data that you collect and you process. Yeah. The categories of such data subjects. So for example, if you're collecting personal data belonging to employees, belonging to shareholders, is it for suppliers, is it customers, students, if you're a school, the purpose of processing, again, so are you processing the data because maybe it's know your customer processes? Is it because of invoicing? And then last but not least, the other thing is recipients of this personal data. If you collect and process personal data, but then it is transferred to, or it is shared with other people, you also have to list them. So is it shared with the RSSB? Is it shared maybe with the BNR, that is the Central Bank of Rwanda, etc. And then of course, Carol talked about the special categories of data that you also have to indicate. So does it, do you collect and process information that, shows the race, religion, political opinions of a data subject, genetic data, biometric data, medical history, and also a person's sex life and sexual orientation as well. If you collect that, you have to indicate also the special categories of data that you collect and process. And then of course the transfer outside Rwanda and the countries you transfer the data to, and then the measures to protect the data, as well as the safeguards. Yeah, so that is pretty standard across board. When it comes to the safeguards, of course, you will have the over and above having identified the risks to personal data and the mitigations. So if it's unlawful disclosure or unauthorized access to personally identifiable information, how is that protected? You also have safeguards. So in terms of what is your privacy policy, the commensurate information security policies to support protection of this data, and so on and so forth. And then last but not least, if you're registering as a processor, you'll need to also upload the contract with the controller. So to show that you indeed have been authorized to process this particular personal data on behalf of the said controller. So you need to have that contract. And then, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. The thing that is interesting with the Rwanda that does not happen in Kenya, I don't know if it's the same also in Uganda, is that in Rwanda, the registration is free with the NCSA. So I know there's a fine, or rather there's a fee attached to registration with the ODPC, but registration with the NCSA is free in Rwanda. So once you register, you get your certificate within 30 days. Yeah. And then in the event of where they review the details that you've uploaded for registration, and they feel that you've either given wrongful information or you didn't disclose everything, you'll be given 15 days to give a reason why that happened. And then after 15 days, then the fines will apply. Yeah. So again, the other thing is after you achieve registration, then some particulars in your application change. So say, for example, you registered as a controller, but then somewhere along the lines, you start undertaking processing activities, then you will also be needed to make, whenever there are changes in the particulars of your registration, you're also supposed to communicate the same to the NCSA within 15 days. Of the change, so that you can start making plans for reapplication and getting your license renewed, if at all it needs such kind of changes. And then if you do not communicate the same to the NCSA within 15 days, again, the fine for 2 million Rwanda franc and max of 5 million Rwanda franc apply. So that is pretty much the main differences that I can see between the privacy law and registration process in Rwanda versus Kenya and Uganda.
Thank you, Mueni. So I think it's a bit different in Rwanda, especially now that the deadline is coming up in October. I think people you can definitely just contact us, and we're going to help you through, because we actually have such a product to help you just register with the NCSA. And then you'll be good to go to avoid now the hasting at the very end. Now to probably just take the conversation further, allow me to throw this to Madam Muriithi Carol. What are now these specific steps involved? Yeah, which are the specific steps that are involved in registering probably in Kenya? Like, let's say, what are the documentations you need to prepare? What is the cost involved? And are there notable differences probably from the one in Kenya, the one in Uganda, and the one in Rwanda? Probably can tell us those specific steps and the cost involved, the documentations that are involved, and then Mueni and Steve can actually just mention if we've left any difference in between those three countries. Carol?
Right, thank you, Migwi. So for registration with the ODPC in Kenya, you go to their website, so odpc.go.ke, and then under e-services, there's an option to register as a data controller or a data processor. So you first create your account, and then you proceed to do the registration. So the application is made on the portal, and most of the information will actually be filled on the portal. The only two documents that you will be required to upload is a record of your annual turnover, because this has as I had mentioned, there's a cost implication, and it is dependent on your number of employees and your annual turnover. So you need to give proof of your annual turnover. And then you also need a certificate of incorporation to just identify your organization. So the other items that we had mentioned about the information that you process and the risks, all this you just fill it within the portal. So no other documents are required to upload. So the difference here, as Mueni has already mentioned, is that registration with the ODPC has a cost attached to it. So again, depending on the number of employees in the annual turnover, there's a cost for registration. So we have different categories. So organizations that have employees between 1 and 50 employees and have a maximum turnover of 5 million are categorized as micro or small data processors. And then if you have between 51 to 99 employees and your turnover is between 5 million and 50 million, you would categorize as a medium controller. So for a micro and small data processors and controllers, they pay 4,000 shillings. For medium controllers, they pay 16,000. And then if you have more than 99 employees and 50 million turnover, above 50 million turnover, you categorize as large data processor and you pay 40,000 for registration. Then we have public entities or any government institutions, they pay 4,000 for registration. And then for charities and religious entities, they pay 4,000 for registration. So when you make your application on the portal, then you make the payment to the ODPC. They can then review your application and then they give you feedback as to whether your application has been accepted or rejected. And if it's been rejected, then you need to make some amendments or update the information back to them so that they are able to process your certificate. Again, as I had mentioned, the registration is done as either a controller or a processor. So if you're registering as both, then you need to make two applications and pay the same amount for the different applications. So maybe if you're a small data processor and at the same time you're a small data controller, so you make two applications and you pay 4,000 for each. So that's how you do the actual registration.
Good, Carol. So you're saying if you're a controller and a processor, then that means you will pay twice. You will pay for each of the two, yeah? And I've also seen you actually be able to pay through mobile money in Kenya. Is that true?
Come again?
Are you able also to pay through mobile money? Is there, so you can also be able to pay through M-Pesa?
Yes, they have offered a couple of payment channels on their website. So could be M-Pesa, could be through credit or debit cards, RTGS checks. So on the website, you could just find more information on the means of payment of this fee for application.
Yeah. So also, Carol, you've said that there can be rejection, yeah? There can be rejection. There can be you can actually apply and be rejected on certain basis, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of those things that would cause that? I know probably that's where the consultants come in. That's where we, Sentinel, come in. So probably what are some of the reasons that would cause that? Maybe just one reason before we go to Mueni and Stephen.
Okay, so maybe it could be that the information you provided was not accurate, or maybe attached to the risks that you provided, they are not deemed to be, the ODPC might not find the risk that you have identified adequate within your environment. So in this case, you'll need to do a reapplication and reassess your environment so that you give more information on that, and then they can assess, and if they're now comfortable, they'll proceed to give you your certificate.
Perfect, Carol. Thank you. So I think to avoid that, probably you can always have someone to guide you through so that you ensure you have you have a direct approval when you're applying. Because some of the things like what is needed in Kenya, some of things like the DPIA is important, and you could probably have done it not correctly, and we can always help you with that. Now, Stephen, is there any difference or what? Or anything you could probably add to what Uganda provides? Anything Carol probably didn't mention for Uganda?
Not really. It's pretty much the same process. The registration is online. The different payment options, you register the payment through the Uganda Revenue Authority website, which does the collection of all fees for MDAs in Uganda. And then you are also required to fill a declaration form, which is contained within the law, Form 3. Have that commissioned and signed and commissioned, and then you upload that. That is the only thing that you do outside the system. The rest, you need to upload available security policies. You have them ready, and then we assess the policies based on the personal data that you're handling. And then we are able to advise. Again, like Carol indicated, we do not reject the applications at the moment. However, we guide you to make sure your application meets the requirements by the office. If you have anything missing, our office representatives will get in touch with you and guide you. If your policy is found to be missing one or two items, you'll be guided, and then to make sure, we're trying to make sure compliance is easy for everyone. Thank you.
Perfect, Steve. Thank you. I don't know whether Mueni, anything different with Rwanda in one point probably.
No, not really. I think just that in Kenya, that there is a portal where you go on to do the registration. In Rwanda, what has happened is they've shared a guidance on how to do the registration, and there are different forms where you go to the National Cybersecurity Authority site. You can download the forms to register either as a controller or a processor. So for the NCSA, the advice is to submit the documents in soft copy. That's what is advised. And if you're doing that, then you sign them. They're expected to be signed digitally, and then zip the folder with all your applications, and then share the same to the email they've provided. That is dpp@ncsa.gov.rw.
Perfect. So in Rwanda, is it's not a portal; it's a bit of submission of the documents. Yeah, quite insightful. Thank you. So now I see Sharon Ishazi. I see your hand is raised. Just hold on to that question. I'm coming to you. Prepare yourself. You'll be the first one to ask this question. And if you also have any question, you can also raise your hand. We're heading there. We just have 3 more questions to go, and then I can allow you guys to ask the question. So now, let me ask these general questions for us to conclude this conversation. Yeah, I can start with probably with Stephen. Stephen, now let's say we've registered and we've already complied. We've done this first step. Yeah, can you probably provide the insights into now what happens post registration? And what are the responsibilities for organizations in terms of ongoing maintenance? What is your responsibility? The management, the IT guys, the persons that are collecting. What happens now after registration? Just a few steps. I know you've mentioned a number of them, the journey past compliance, but what would you say would be the specific roles and our responsibilities for for people in the organizations to be able to keep this compliance journey ongoing? To you, Steve.
Thank you. One of the things that you're required to do as a registered controller or processor is to file annual compliance reports to the office. Now, the compliance reports basically talks about your data protection and privacy activities throughout the year. And this has a window of 90 days, that is after the financial year, between July and September. Now, we have made it simple. We provide a template for this reporting. It captures best information. Have you had any changes from the information you provided at registration? Have you received any breaches? How did you handle them? Have you had any complaints from data subjects? How did you handle them? And then once you provide this report, we are able to review the report and also guide you accordingly. Now, the office also requires you to continuously report any breaches, any data breaches that happen at your premises. An example, if say there is a wrongful access of personal data in your possession, the law requires that you immediately report to the office as soon as you come to know that the breach has happened. So we expect you to continuously monitor your systems, monitor the application of the policies you have in place, and report any breaches to the authority. Again, data subjects are required to report to you any breaches or complaints. And once you receive those complaints, you do your assessment and internal handling based on your internal processes. You're also required to report to the office. And we also expect that for better compliance, you conduct data protection impact assessments. I know either Carol or Faith talked about this, and also do privacy audits. These are basically meant to help you check yourself. How are you complying? And for all the registered entities, we provide self-assessment checks, which basically guide you as an entity to see how you're faring with the compliance journey. And if you meet any challenges using the assessment guidelines provided, or if you find that you're lacking in one or two areas, our office is open to provide any guidance on how you can be able to close any particular gaps. And then the other requirement is to renew your registration every 12 months. Yeah, so that's basically it. You need to ensure that you continuously monitor the implementation of the policies and security measures you have in place. It's very risky to have a policy that you do not implement yourself. It's very risky to have measures, security measures, and they are only on the shelves. So we advise that once you have a policy, you continuously monitor the adherence to the policy. If you have security measures, ensure you continuously check them, review, and be able to work on any issues that you notice. That's basically that when it comes to post-registration activities.
Amazing, Steve. Thank you. So there is quite a bit of a responsibility going forward. So the journey doesn't end at registration, as I hear. It's important because at the end of the day, it's not about the registration. It's about compliance. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to find data breaches that happen and you were not ready. You just did registration and you didn't even, you're not continuously updating. Remember, these things keep changing. Technology is changing daily. The information we are collecting changes from this to that. Yeah. So ensure that compliance is continuous. Thank you so much, Steve. I think we are really tapping a lot of knowledge from you. So over to Carol. Carol, now I've heard of all of you mention the DPO, but from probably Mueni, the data protection officers, I've heard you say, especially in Kenya, you need to provide a number or provide the name of the DPO. So you need to have probably pre-selected the DPO before. So what are some of the roles and responsibilities of these DPOs? And definitely they can't work alone. What are their roles together with management in organizations when it comes to this compliance? And probably you can also tell us how can they effectively fulfill these duties in ensuring privacy and protection within the organization. The DPOs, how do they work with management, and what are some of the responsibilities that are supposed to be given to them, and how do they actually fulfill their duties in organizations? Over to you, Carol.
Right, thank you, Migwi. So just as you've mentioned, having a DPO or a data protection officer is one of the requirements in the Kenyan law. So a data protection officer is basically the person in charge of ensuring that the organization is compliant to the requirements of the law. So some of the roles of this data protection officer is one, they are the contact persons between the organization and the regulatory body. So I'm sure one of the questions was who makes the application to the regulator. So it is part of the responsibilities of the data protection officer to make this application and to be the contact person in case there are any issues or follow-ups that need to be made by the regulatory body. They're the ones to do this. Then the data protection officer also gives advisory to management and also staff on data protection related issues. So in case there are any issues or any questions by staff, maybe on how they should handle their personal information they handle, they should channel this to the data protection officer. And then they also give advisory to management on what needs to be implemented or to be done within the organization to ensure compliance. They also assess your processing activities together with any applications or softwares that you're using to just see if in doing this we are compliant, or we need to assess any risks that are attached to our processing activities, and they help us to maybe identify these gaps and come up with action points on how to resolve the same. The DPO is also in charge of conducting awareness to the organization. As Stephen said, doing awareness is a key aspect of ensuring compliance, because we need to continuously inform our staff and all levels of employees within the organization for them to be able to understand what is their role in as far as ensuring protection of this personal identifiable information. So they're the ones who are in charge of organizing or also conducting such training and awareness. And then we also have a requirement in the law where the data subjects have their rights. So these are rights such as right to access the information, right to object processing, right of deletion of the information. So they need to ensure that these data subject rights have been responded to and have been responded to in time, because in some of the regulations, such as in Kenya, we have timelines for which you need to reply to these data subject requests. So overall, they're just in charge of ensuring compliance of the organization and acting as the contact person for the organization. So management needs to support the DPO role or office by ensuring that in case they need any kind of resources to be able to implement these controls, they should be able to facilitate the same. Also, when they come up with any data protection policies, they should be able to approve and communicate the same, so that this is communicated within the entire organization. Yeah, so that is who the DPO is and how they relate to management. And then the other key thing to note is that the DPO should be independent, so they should not have conflict of interest, and they should be able to have enough time to conduct their DPO-related activities. So their work should not be interfered with, because they come in as an advisory role. Yeah, so that's the role of the DPO related to management.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Carol. Just before I let you go, there is this question I've always been asked by clients when I meet them in the field, especially right now that they're trying to pick up a DPO. They're trying to probably who will be the DPO, because if there is one thing I understand is the DPO shouldn't be someone from outside. Yeah, they should be people who understand the probably the processes and all that. Yeah, so. Who needs to become the DPO? Is it the IT guy, or who is best placed to choose as DPO? Or how would you phrase that? Because I'm sure people are wondering, do I choose this IT person? Do I choose this lawyer? Do they really need to be a lawyer?
Okay, thanks for that question, Migwi. So there are a few things you need to consider when selecting your DPO. So one should be, they should have an understanding of your organization, or even if it's a new employee, they should be able to assess the organization and have an understanding of all the processing activities that you have, then it's not necessary for them, it's not particular for them to be a lawyer. They could have maybe it could be a legal background or also a technology background, but they should be able to understand first the law and its requirements and be able to interpret it for the organization. And then it might also help if they have some technical background so that they are able to maybe assess the risks that are attached to where the information sits. So they need to be well versed with these different areas. So it might not necessarily be your IT guy because first of all, when they're the IT guys, they might not be able to have enough time to do the DPO activities. Just as you've mentioned, they need to be able to have time to do DPO activities. So it's mostly advised to just get a person who is just strictly in charge of matters data protection, so that they're able to play their role effectively. And if it's somebody selected internally, also ensure it's somebody who it does not pose a conflict of interest. So, for example, they can't not be the ones who are implementing. So, an example again with the IT guy, the IT people are the ones who enable or facilitate technical implementation of processing of this information. So they might not be able to check themselves. Because the DPO should be able to check that processing to see if it complies to the regulation. So again, maybe an IT person, internal IT person will not be a suitable person to take up such a role.
Thank you, Caro. Thank you, Caro. Maybe Stephen, the DPO, is this the guy who carries out the DPIA, the Data Protection Impact Assessment? Or because sometimes you get that confusion. Is it the guy who's supposed to carry out the DPIA or the guys that are actually doing the processes? Or what would you advise on that, Stephen?
Okay, thank you. Maybe just before I can answer that, something that is slightly different with Uganda is the DPO role can actually be outsourced. The law can allows you to outsource the DPO role, for example, to a company. You can outsource the DPO role to Mugabe and company. And all it requires is the DPO needs to understand the law and the duties that come with the position of being DPO, as well as the liability it comes with in case of non-compliance by the organization. Okay? The DPO should be someone able to exhibit a level of independence and provide the necessary guidelines. The DPO is supposed to advise the organization on any processing that they are going to handle. So it's okay for the DPO to carry out the data protection impact assessment. That is, if they do understand the process of actually carrying it out. However, if the DPO is probably not qualified or they are unable to carry out the impact assessment, because it's also a rigorous task that requires you to have a certain kind of knowledge and skill set, then they can advise to have that role of carrying out a data protection impact assessment done by someone else. So this can be on a case-by-case basis. The DPO can do the impact assessment, or you can have that particular assessment outsourced. It's something that can be on a case-by-case basis. The issue of who can be appointed DPO, for our case as Uganda, the Data Protection Office, the Personal Data Protection Office, is in the process of providing guidelines on the appointment or of a data protection officer. Now, the guidelines will clearly spell out who can be appointed, what sort of qualification, what sort of training, and expound more on the roles that they are supposed to play. Currently, we are running on the roles as spelled out in the law, but of course, we receive a number of questions, clarification. What does this legal jargon mean in terms of the role? So we are in the process of bringing it down to everyone's understanding, so that as you appoint or designate a data protection officer, you know this is the basic requirement in terms of qualification, and this is their role, so that even you, as you're taking up the role, you know what it comes with. Because once there is a data breach, and we carry, because the office has the mandate to investigate circumstances under which the data breach has happened. If we find that it happened because you did not advise the organization as the data protection officer, you're liable to punishment by law, because it is in your docket to advise the office, to advise the organization on data handling. So as people take up the roles, it is important to have a clear definition of what their duties are supposed to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So they need to be aware of it's not only responsibility, there are liabilities to it. And thank you so much for that. I think because of time, let me ask Mueni the final question.
But that is not to tell people not to take up the roles.
Yeah, sure.
As well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you so much, Steve. So it's important. Definitely, it helps to be a lawyer, but you don't have to be a lawyer. Yeah, at least I've seen a DPO who is a lawyer, and he's also an implementer, and it works really well. But you don't have to be a lawyer. Definitely, you can always be advised, and that's where we come in to help you now conduct the DPIAs, be able to interpret the jargon. We have those DPOs in with us. We can also be outsourced DPOs to you. Now, Mueni, just probably the final question is how now for these regulators to be able to know, are you compliant? They need to carry out some audits, yeah? They need to carry out some checks. Whether you guys are, our attendees are complying to these regulations. How do they do that, yeah? Can you share some of the best practices for preparing and undergoing these audits? Because audits usually need some preparations for you not to fail, yeah? So just share a bit, how do they do it and what do we need to do to be ready for these audits and be able to ace these audits? Mueni.
Okay, it's funny you should say that, because it's the behavior when it comes to audit. You're always thinking, what do I need to do to ace that audit? It's not a matter of compliance, it's actually a matter of acing the audit. But really, when you look at it, the expectation here is just that you comply, because what is at stake is bigger in terms of the data subject rights and the fines attached to non-compliance. But maybe before I go to that, it's something that both Carol and Stephen have been discussing with regards to the data protection officer, the situation in both Rwanda and rather in Kenya and Uganda. So in the roles are pretty similar also in Rwanda. The expectation is that as a controller or processor, you have to designate a DPO, yeah? And also in Rwanda, this person can either be internal or they can also be on a service contract. So a DPO does not have to be someone who sits in the organization. They can also be someone who you've determined has the adequate skills and capabilities and knowledge to play the role in your organization, and they can exist outside the organization as long as they have a service contract. Now, the other thing, the guidance also in Rwanda is that for an organization that operates as a group with, different maybe operate in different countries, yeah, or you have different entities spread across different regions, the expectation is that you can also designate one data protection officer as long as they be available to satisfy and meet the needs for all of the entities within the group. And then lastly, when it comes to public authorities or bodies in the country, a single DPO can be designated to serve a couple of authorities or entities in the public sector, depending on the size. Yeah. And so I find that very interesting. The other thing that I've also seen is that the NCSA in Rwanda is really, really helpful, and especially where you're going through the registration process, really helpful in terms of guiding organizations to, look at the application documents, what needs to be modified, what needs to be done so that the registration can be complete. So now, when it comes to matters auditing, so supervisory body has been set up in Uganda, in Kenya, in Rwanda. They need to do their work, which is to ensure that we actually are compliant, right? And so what does it mean? It essentially means that, first of all, in terms of the post-registration activities, what Steve said is that you don't register and then you go to sleep. There's work that needs to be done, so that is designating the DPO and ensuring that you're doing the work such as ensuring the data subject rights are observed. Yeah. If someone says that they want to be forgotten, you have forms to afford them the right to be able to delete their data that you've collected about them. You also have to ensure that you're conducting continued training and awareness in organizations so that you can avoid incidents where data is exposed either maliciously or also accidentally. You have to, where you have new processing activities, you conduct a privacy impact assessment to inform on the risk that is posed to the data subject and the impact to the data subject, so that you can have the necessary mitigants. And then also reviewing and updating the policies and procedures, yeah, ensuring that they stay relevant, that they stay speaking to the context of the organization at any given point in time. And then monitoring incidents and reporting. In Rwanda, the case is that you report 48 hours, within 48 hours of an incident happening, or rather of detection of an incident, you report the same to the NCSA, and then you have up to 72 hours to document a breach report. So now in the breach report, you have to talk about what is the breach that has happened, contact details of the DPO for further details where needed, measures that have been taken to address the data breach so far, the consequences of the breach and actions taken, and then how you propose to communicate to the affected data subject. Yeah. And then when it comes to communicating, the other interesting thing is that communication to the data subjects happens only if, rather, it's not compulsory to communicate a data breach if it does not lead to high impacts to the rights and freedoms of a data subject. So say, for example, I had data that is stored on a particular system, there was a breach, but then how I had stored that data, it was de-identified in such a manner that it cannot be used to trace back to a particular person, to any individual, or to a data subject. Then where a breach does not impact a data subject, does not pose any high risks, then it's not compulsory to communicate the same to the data subject. So it's very interesting. So as those are now the post-registration activities that are set out in the law. And so then when a supervisory body is coming to conduct an audit, they basically, first of all, will give a notice of audit. I think sometime early this year, or was it late last year, ODPC in Kenya gave a notice of some 40 money mobile lending firms that they were actually going to audit. Yeah. And so they'll give a notice of audit. And then the key focus of the audit will basically then that, first of all, you have a valid registration license, and that the post-registration activities are actually being done. Yeah, they've been implemented fully. You keep records of your processing activities. You have all the requisite policies and documents to show compliance with the data subject's rights. Yeah, and then just pretty much to show that all the data subject rights are observed, that whenever there is wherever there is a breach, it is notified effectively and in good time. and so on and so forth. Now, how will they conduct such audits? So they'll confirm compliance in a number of ways. So the first one is an on-site inspection, right? So a supervisory body might come on-site on the premise to actually investigate and review data protection policies and procedures, as well as the technical measures that you've put in place. Yeah. So if you say we de-identify information when it is in storage, then they might actually come on site to conduct such kind of an assessment. The second thing is also they might request for documentation review. So they may request to be given access to your documentation, such as privacy policies, incident response plans, and any other, say, data processing agreements that you have with processors. The third thing, how a supervisory body will go about conducting an audit is also interviews. So they may interview employees of an organization to get their insights on the data protection practices. And then lastly is testing, where they need to actually come in and test different controls and different technical measures that you've said you've put in place. So you say that you transfer data outside the country, transfer it to country A, B, C, D, and these are the measures that we have put in place to ensure that the data is protected while it is there. Then I will also conduct testing just to ensure that the controls to protect data have been implemented sufficiently. Yeah.
Thank you, Mueni. So quite insightful. Means then there will be a notice, so they won't come without a notice. Then I'm sure you can get ready for that. Yeah. But as Mueni is mentioning, it's about the compliance, it's about what is attached to it. If you don't continuously do it, not for compliance, not for the registration, but you do it for your own organization's sake, because of when breaches happen and you don't have the set procedures in place, then it's going to be really, really bad for you. We've seen companies in Kenya and even in the globally have been slapped with fines, big fines. In Kenya, you have, was it Oppo that was slapped with around 5 million? So it's important for us to be able to comply. And remember these risks, if you're slapped with a fine, then some of these fines might be very detrimental to your business. So now, on probably compliance, probably Mueni, just to finalize on it, there is why you've said we are transferring data outside. Probably you're transferring even data to we have a company, we have a company has a branch in the European Union, we have a branch in the US. What are some of other things that we need to comply with, apart from now our own regulation? Just for you to sum it up, tell us what are some of other rules or regulations that we need to comply with globally, apart from now these ones that are specific to us, or what can we be able to do?
Okay. Just to be sure I'm getting your question. So you're asking in terms of if we exist as a group and then we transfer data to different countries?
Yeah, let's say we transfer data to Europe. What are some of other things we need to comply? Do we need to comply with the GDPR? Do we need to start thinking about standardization with ISO and so on and so forth?
Okay, so no, not really. See, the thing is, for example, the GDPR applies to EU citizens. So who's expected to comply with the GDPR? It is anybody who stores, collects, and processes information or personal data belonging to citizens in EU countries. Yeah. So then if you're in Kenya, but then you collect data belonging to people in countries in the EU, then you're expected to ensure that you comply with the GDPR. And so then what I would say is that right now, as an organization, even when you're investigating and you're coming up with your own personal data inventory, who are the data subjects that I have, what kind of information do I collect? You also have to ask yourself where these people are from, who are these data subjects, yeah? Because then, as a Kenyan, my rights and freedoms as a person are afforded, or they are protected through the Data Protection Act. So the expectation then will be that you observe and you comply with the requirements of the Data Protection Act. So it will basically be that just being aware of what kind of data you're collecting, who does it belong to, so that you can ensure that you have all the necessary compliance in check. But then the other thing is now fine, you are complying with the relevant laws and regulations, but then how do you protect information whenever it is being transferred to other regions or outside the country? So the first thing is, of course, where you're doing the transfer, you want to have technical controls such as encryption of information. So if you're transferring this information, say via email, what are the encryption controls that have been put in place there? If you're storing this data on a cloud server somewhere in Germany, how is that data stored? Is it stored in plain text? Has it been anonymized such that I cannot be able to really tell that this is Ian Migwi's information? Yeah. So you need to have that kind, and especially that anonymization and the identification of information is very, very critical. And I saw someone asking a question where, you're expected to give information to auditors. You normally will go through audits, and then as part of that, you provide information. So how do you ensure that that information is protected? So again, yes, you're supposed to provide the information, but then you ensure that you provide only what is relevant, and for the most part, personal data belonging to data subjects should be de-identified even when it is being shared with other third parties. And then where you have agreements to share information with, say, if you're a controller and then you're sharing information with a processor, whether they be in country or out of the country, you need to have very clear data processing agreements that list out the kind of information you're giving them. It also says exactly what are the processing activities that they are allowed to conduct on that particular set of data that you give them, and what is out of bounds in terms of the processing activities. And then also you should expect the processor to provide, also give you evidence of the controls they've put on their site in terms of the technical security measures they've put in place to ensure protection of information. And also you as a controller want to engage a processor who's also registered and also who is compliant with the relevant laws in their country. So again, a matter of ensuring that you have all the bases covered, and that really becomes the role of primarily the DPO, ensuring that they have their eyes on that to ensure that we achieve.
Thank you, Mueni. I think that's very clear. I think we'll have to book another session, yeah? Time is really not on our side, but allow me now, guys, to just give one or two of you to ask questions. I've seen questions on Q&A, but just raise up your hand. I'll give two people to just ask the verbal questions, and then Mueni and Caro and Stephen, kindly check the Q&A. You can help me answer some of the things that we've not answered directly on chat. Yeah, but just raise up your hand. We can start with Sharon. Is Sharon still with us? Sharon Ishazi, who had asked the question. Just raise up your hand if you would like to probably just ask a question verbally because of time. Anyone who don't? I see Joel. We'll start with Joel. Anyone else? Joel Odama. I will give you a chance. Anyone else? I'm just going to pick two. I see Joel Odama. Good. I can't see anyone else. Anyone else? All right. Let me first of all give Joel. I think we'll just only have Joel, and then we'll answer some of the few questions on Q&A. But I can see Sharon. If Sharon is still with us, you can probably just raise up your hand. So Joel, I'm going to unmute you. Just introduce yourself to us, and then just ask your question, and then we're going to have it answered. So Joel, in a minute, you'll be unmuted, your video and your audio, and then you can just go ahead, yeah? Joel, if you can hear me? Just a minute. Good. Joel, go ahead now, Joel. You can ask your question. In the meantime, Mueni, as Joel tries to reconnect, Mueni, could you probably just help me answer some of the questions? So Joel, welcome. Just go ahead and ask your question. Joel, you can unmute your mic. We can't hear you. Unfortunately, seems like we are unable to connect to Joel. Joel, good. We can hear you now.
Okay, mine is a question on intellectual property. Is if a company, say an entity has registered with a trademark, do they also qualify to register for a data protection policy under NITA in Uganda? Then how are the two related? Or how
Good.
different are they?
All right. So, Stephen, you've got that? Okay. Just hold on to that, Stephen, if you've got it. Let me know if you've got it so that we can go to the next person and then we'll answer them together, yeah? Stephen, you've got that?
Yes, I did pick the question.
Okay, you will answer it. Let me allow now Maureen Namo, just will allow you to talk. Maureen Namo, you can go ahead, and then you're going to have the last one will be Uimana Oscar. We'll have Maureen Namo and then Uimana Oscar. Maureen, you can hear me? Okay, just a minute, guys. We'll take a few minutes. Then just as said, Mueni and Caro, kindly just help me in answering some of the question down there in Q&A. Then Oscar, Uimana Oscar, you can go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll have Maureen. Good, Maureen has connected. Let's start with Oscar, then we go to Maureen. Oscar, you can go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly. Okay,
so mine is more of a clarification to what Mueni was saying. So she talked about the auditors. So I wanted to ask, are auditors considered as third parties? And if so, does this mean they can't access all the information? Like, of course, all the information has to be, like some of it has to be hidden from third parties, of course, to also safeguard the information. And then if this is true as well, does that interfere with their work? Won't it maybe in one way or another interfere with what they are doing, since they can't be able to access some bits of the information?
Good. Thank you. I am sure when you've got that. Then we can have the last one, Maureen Namo. Can you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon to you.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. I would like to ask, can we, okay, I know that we combine cybersecurity and data privacy and protection, but is it something that is there in especially Kenya? Because I know like handling them in both, in different, of course, in different sections, it comes up with high costs and all that. So is it possible, or rather, to separate them, or it's best to have them in one department? The other question was, I don't know if you saw my questions on the chat box.
Go ahead, you can.
On the qualifications of DPO, because you say that, of course, sometimes it's about law and about IT, but nowadays, even people with in internal audit have the skills on being data privacy officers and also cybersecurity skills. So if you can maybe answer that question, it would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen Namo. So, Caro, you got that, yeah? Good. So we'll answer them quickly. We'll start with Steve. Steve, answer your question, then Mueni, then Caro pick it up. Just let's answer them directly, yeah? Then go ahead, Steve.
All right, thank you. The question regarding trademark registration versus data protection, you were wondering if you've registered the trademark, if you actually need to register with the data protection and privacy. I'll say the straightforward answer is yes, one, but I'll try to give a perspective. Registration of the trademark gives the owner an exclusive right to use the registered mark on their goods or services for which they've registered. Now, an example is, say, for example, if you register a trademark for production of, say, fruit juice, you have your trademark registered, Stevens Juice, and you're working with people to produce this product, either as employees or contractors, or you even have suppliers for which, from whom you collect personal data. You're required to handle the personal data of the people that you're working with in a way that respects their privacy. So at that point, you will be required to register with the Data Protection Office as either a data processor or a data controller. So based on the scenario, you will be required to register with the Data Protection Office. If you register a trademark and keep it with you, you're doing nothing with it, you're not involved in any way of handling personal data, you do not have to do that. I don't know if I'm allowed to probably throw a little more clarification on a question that appeared in Q&A. My question is audit standards. Auditors are never denied access to data in request. How do you protect company data shared to auditors by way in case for the future? That was by Sharon. One, you realize that if sharing information, personal data is allowed by law or a requirement by law, then you are supposed to share that particular information. However, as you're sharing with your auditors, I believe these auditors are contracted to provide a service to you. And one of the things that needs to come out in their contract is non-disclosure, and this should be in the data sharing agreement. You're giving them the information only for the purposes of executing their role as auditors. So in case they use the information over and above the execution of their role as auditors, then it now turns against them by law. They are held responsible for not handling the personal data in their possession. However, if you just give them the information without any non-disclosure clauses, without clear information on how they are supposed to handle this personal information, it is now a liability on you who is sharing this personal information. So it's that's why it is important for you to get advisory from one, the data protection officer, and in case you need more clarity on the same, you can always talk to your regulator for more guidance. Because much as we have to respect the personal information in our possession, we still need services delivered. We cannot say put hold to service delivery because we are respecting privacy. The issue is not about, we are not saying don't share personal information. We're saying share it for only purpose it is provided to you. I hope that clarifies. And for sharing the information beyond borders, one, the law, take an example, the Ugandan law requires that if you're to share information across borders, you should be able to ascertain that the country in which this information is going has as adequate protection to personal data as the Ugandan law. Okay, and if that is not the case, then you should be able to get consent from the data subject for you to be able to share that information. If it's not the consent, then do a data protection impact assessment for you to be able to do the sharing. Again, you can get, this cannot be exhausted, but you can get a guidance from the regulator and also be guided by the data protection officer. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. Thank you. I think you've answered both questions, the one for audits and the one that the very first one. So I'll probably jump directly to Carol because of time. Carol, probably you can answer the last one. We combine cybersecurity and privacy, and also what are some of the qualifications for a DPO? Just in summary, because of time.
Okay, thanks, Migwi. So information security and data privacy are a bit related, but they are not necessarily the same. And then with regards to the laws, in Kenya, we have the Cyber Crimes Act and laws from KICA Kenya, the Kenya Information and Communications Act, that detail things to do with information security and how the response should be undertaken. But then for data protection, we have the requirements from the Data Protection Act. And then with regards to having them within the organization, so they should not sit in the same department, because information security are more of implementers, like things like coming up with the security controls and also the policies. And the DPO should be more of a checker. So they should be able to check what the InfoSec team is doing to ensure that it is in compliance with the regulation. So the best department, because I've seen another question, for DPO to sit is maybe in the risk and compliance department or legal department or audit, where they can check what the rest are doing. Then with regards to the qualifications of the DPO, over and above just understanding the regulations, maybe the Data Protection Act in Kenya or in Uganda or in Rwanda, they can also do some certifications. Maybe we have the PIMS, what Mueni is certified in, Privacy Information Management Systems. So it's the standard for data privacy. So it just has guidelines on how to implement a data protection framework. You can also do a CDPO, Certified Data Protection Officer Certification by PCB. You can also do CIPP, Certified Information Professional, Certified Information Privacy Professional, or CIPM, Certified Information Privacy Manager. So these are just some of the certifications that you can do in order to demonstrate your capability of implementing a data protection framework. So over and above understanding maybe your industry and also understanding the law, these are also good certifications to have for that. So I hope that answers.
Perfect, Carol. Perfect. I think just the way Namu had said, you can have done other different courses, yeah, but there's some certifications you can actually do for you to actually depict that you are fit for the DPO role. So guys, I think we'll have to book another session. I'm so sorry. Just go to Q&A. Some of your questions have been answered by our panelists on Q&A. So make sure if you had asked a question on Q&A, just go right there, and then we can be able to see some of those questions answered. Now, allow me, before I give our guests, our panelists, to give their closing remarks, to maybe probably allow me to pay some few bills, yeah? How do you now go, or can you advance this further as a person? So what Carol has mentioned, at Sentinel Africa, we have these particular courses. We have a course, a training in 27701. We have this one that is upcoming on 31st of July to 4th of August. It's a certified data protection officer. You get a globally recognized certificate. It's a 5 days training, and it's both the hybrid and both physical. So if you're in other countries, you can always be able to attend. So ensure you just email us back if you want to undertake this particular training. We'll be able to send you a proposed price quote so that you can share with your organization, or you seek approvals with it. Then something else, if you're in Rwanda, this conversation doesn't stop here. We actually have an upcoming physical conference or a workshop on navigating data protection implementation in Rwanda. We've said your deadline is coming up in October. So now, if you're in an organization and in this position that you really need to understand deeply on how to guide the organization on the same, kindly make sure you just email us back to the email that you receive. You can even email us to info@sentinelafrica.rw, and we'll be able now to guide you. Or even email me back with the email that is on we're going to receive, and you're going to guide you. So it's 699 Rwanda franc. You can be able to attend. It's going to be at Ubumwe Grande Hotel. So welcome so much for those of you that are in Rwanda. And then finally, how can your organization advance this further? So what we've done at Sentinel Africa is your advisor of choice. We put together a registration suite, yeah? So this suite, we are going to help you register with these three regulatory bodies. So what you do for us to be able to assist you, just email directly to us, write directly to us, and then we'll start that conversation. When we start that conversation, then we're going to guide you in registering. Even in a week or even in 2 weeks, you're going to be able to be registered. So finally, allow me to would love to get some feedback from you. Would really love to get some feedback from you so that now we can better this webinar next time, yeah? So just go on polls, click on polls, kindly rate our today's webinar. I've sent a poll there. It's good for us to know how was the webinar. Rate us in 5 stars or 4 star. You can rate us in 1 star. Just rate us so that you can be able to know what do we improve on next time, yeah? What do we improve on next time? So now also, I would love for you guys to probably also give us more feedback. Just vote. I see 24 have voted. Just continue voting, just rate us. It's important. This feedback is important for us to be able to even share with you next time, be able to even do better next time. And we really appreciate this feedback because it's the one that helps us do even better next time. So thank you for those that have voted. Then finally on feedback, go to Q&A. Just go to Q&A. At Q&A, I've shared a link. Just click on that link and vote and just write something. Q&A, I've shared a link. Good. I've shared a link on Q&A. So just go there, then answer question 1. Type 1 or 2 words that best describes today's webinar, yeah? As you go on Q&A, what I'm saying, you go on Q&A. I see some of people are answering. What best describes this webinar, yeah? What best describes this webinar? So let me share my screen. Someone is saying enlightening. Someone else is saying great. Good. Someone else is saying great. I see. Someone else is saying relevant. Someone is saying thought-provoking. Good. Thank you for that feedback. We really appreciate that feedback. We really appreciate the feedback. Good. Then we can go to the next question, the final question now. The final question. The one, what topics would you like us to cover next time? You can go to the next question. What are the topics you would like us to cover next time? What topics would you like us to cover next time? Good. Just click on that link. Good. I see people are sharing. What topics would you like us to nini next time? Good. ISO 27 web security. Just tell us which topics you'd like to see. Which topics would you like us to cover next time? ISO 27001. Someone is saying web security. You can just vote. It's the same link. You just click on the same link, then you go to next question, yeah? And we can end it at that. So someone is saying common cyber threats. Someone is saying data privacy again, IP. Thank you so much. ISO 31000. I say ISO 31000, ISO 22301. Thank you for these topics. I guess when we get this feedback is what we use, because we have a webinar coming up in one in September, and then a major webinar coming up in November that is going to even have breakout sessions. You're going to have the first 2 sessions, then you have another major webinar in the afternoon. So thank you for these topics. I think these are the ones that are going to pick up. Zero trust in frameworks. combating cyber threats. I see someone asking for 22301. Data protection in East African countries, and then cybersecurity and AI. Zero trust. Thank you for that feedback. We really appreciate for that feedback. I think we'll be able to utilize the same, and we're going to make sure we are. Thank you for saying that the webinar was awesome. We really are grateful. So, guys, allow me to end the webinar at that. And before I end it, I want to give our panelists, starting with Stephen, then we go to Caro, then we go to Mueni. Give us your final remarks. What would you tell our attendees? You can also say thank you for them for attending, and then your final closing remarks. We start with Stephen.
Thank you, Sentinel, for organizing this, and thank you everyone who attended the webinar. We appreciate your time, and just to let you know, our office is open for anyone that needs advice on matters related to data protection and privacy, and also to let you know that your privacy matters. So be vigilant. You're the first person to ensure that your privacy is respected. Thank you so much for attending.
We appreciate you, Steve. Thank you for having time. And then you can go to Caro.
Thank you, Migwi. So thank you everyone for joining the session. It was an interesting conversation to just hear the different requirements in the different areas. Just also to say that in case you have any further questions or concern, feel free to reach out to Sentinel. The contacts have been provided on the screen. Thank you very much.
Perfect, Caro. Then Mueni, we can have you give your last remarks.
Okay, thank you, Migwi. So also me, just to thank everybody who's made time for this session. Thank you for everybody who's participated. It's truly been very interactive. I've seen still some more questions. If we've been collecting the details when you were doing the registration, where we have questions that we've not yet answered, we'll definitely reach out to you through that. Also to thank my fellow panelists, Stephen and Carol. Your insights were truly interesting and amazing, and it was a pleasure to have done this with you. I think for me, it's just to say all the best to everybody who's currently doing their registration in Rwanda. Just to also emphasize that at Sentinel Africa, we're available to help, give all the guidance that you can to ensure that you go through a successful process. And similarly also here in Kenya, and we wish you guys all the best. And then just to mention something that I've seen someone in the chat saying, that with these laws, it's not really so much about the fines that you'll be slapped with due to non-compliance, really, but it's more so about exercising the rights and freedoms of data, or rather ensuring that you observe the rights and freedoms of data subjects, and that those are afforded to them because it really is their right. So it's a bigger conversation more than just the fines and ensuring that you're complying, but also just ensuring that you're respecting everybody's personal information that you come into contact with, because you definitely would not feel good if it was your information that was exposed, if it was someone else impersonating you. And so then you want to ensure that you exercise the same when you're dealing with personal data belonging to other people, not just as organizations, but also as individuals, to ensure that we actually observe and respect the privacy rights of persons. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mueni. Grateful for that. I think, and then you can connect with our panelists. Mueni on LinkedIn. What's your name on LinkedIn? It's Mueni. It's Faith.
Yes, my name is Mueni Faith on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn, it's Mueni Faith. Then Caro, it's Caro Muriithi.
Yes, Carol Muriithi on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and then Stephen, it's Stephen Mugabe, right?
Yes, Stephen Mugabe.
Perfect. And then now ensure you follow Sentinel Africa on LinkedIn. When you follow us, we're going to share the link to the recorded version of this webinar, and you can be able to just go to LinkedIn, follow our page, And then from there, you will be able to stay updated for upcoming webinars and even upcoming events that are really beneficial to you. So from me, I'm really grateful for giving us the time, and even to the management at Sentinel Africa for giving us this chance. And I'm really sure, or I'm hoping that everyone has gained something, one or two, for you to be able to take even expand the conversation to your organization. The conversation is simplified now. Ensure you kickstart this conversation in your management. We do implementation for data privacy at Sentinel Africa. We do training. Yeah, we do outsource DPOs as managed services. So ensure you start the conversation with us. And finally, something someone asked, that if you're going to get certificates, yes, you can actually get certificate, but you need to indicate, just email back, ask for the certificate, share with us the name you would want to appear on the certificate, your official name. And then that way we prepare the certificate and send you a soft copy of the same. Otherwise, guys, I'm really grateful. There are 100 of you that were able to attend. There are 152 of you that were able to, just 209 people were able to register. Unfortunately, we're not able to host all of you, but next time we'll ensure we try and host the bigger number, 209 who registered. But for those who are able to make it and came in early and were not locked out, thank you so much. Until next time, my name is Migwi Bonface, or you can follow me on LinkedIn as Ian Bonface Migwi. See you next time, and I wish you the best in your compliance journey. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Great moderating, Migwi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye, guys.